The moment you stop explaining yourself is the moment your life begins to change at a level most people will never reach. Not because you suddenly become louder or dominate conversations, but because you finally understand something most people spend their entire lives missing. You don't need to be understood to have power. And that realization is where everything begins. Because if you look closely at how most people live, you'll notice a pattern. They are constantly explaining themselves, explaining why they did something, why they said something, what they meant, and what they didn't mean. They are constantly managing perception, trying to shape how others see them, trying to avoid being misunderstood, trying to stay in control of their image. And on the surface, it looks normal. It even looks responsible, mature, and socially aware. But underneath, it's driven by something much deeper. The fear of losing approval, because the truth is, most people are not speaking to express themselves. They're speaking to protect how they're perceived, and that's where they lose. Because the moment your behavior is controlled by how others might interpret you, you're no longer in control. You've handed that control over, piece by piece, to every person around you, and they don't even have to ask for it. You give it away automatically every time you feel the need to explain. Now here's where it gets interesting. This doesn't feel like weakness when you're doing it. It feels like responsibility. It feels like you're being clear, fair, and understood. But in reality, you're training people to expect access. Access to your thoughts, reasoning, and emotions. And once people get used to that access, they start depending on it. They expect responses and clarify everything. And the moment you don't, they feel the shift. That's when the dynamic changes, because suddenly you're no longer predictable. And predictability is what keeps you controllable. So when you remove that, you remove their ability to anticipate you. You stop them from pulling you into reactions or guiding the interaction, and that creates uncertainty. Now, here's the truth about uncertainty. Most people don't handle it well. When they don't know what you're thinking or how you feel, they start trying to fill in the gaps. They guess, they assume, they project their own thoughts onto you. And this is the moment where most people break. Because when someone misunderstands them, they feel the need to jump in and fix it. They feel that pressure rising, that urge to say, "No, that's not what I meant. Let me explain. You're seeing it wrong." And the second they do that, they go right back to where they were. Back to being predictable and controlled by perception. But if you can resist that moment, if you can sit in that discomfort and not react immediately, something powerful happens. You begin to separate yourself from the need to be understood. And that separation is what creates control. Because now your actions are no longer tied to other people's interpretations. You're no longer adjusting yourself based on what someone might think. You're operating from a place that's internal, stable, and self-defined. And that is rare. Because most people never build that. They stay externally driven. Their confidence depends on feedback, their behavior depends on approval, and their communication depends on reaction. So they never experience what it feels like to be completely self-contained. But when you stop explaining yourself, that's exactly what you start building. A self-contained presence. A presence that doesn't leak energy, doesn't chase validation, and doesn't react to every stimulus. It just is, and that kind of presence changes everything. Because now, you're not just participating in interactions, you're influencing them. Without saying much, without doing much, just through how you carry yourself. Now let's go deeper, because this isn't just about silence, it's about what your silence represents. There are two types of silence. One comes from insecurity, and the other comes from control. Insecure silence is when you don't speak because you're afraid. Afraid of saying the wrong thing, being judged, or conflict. That silence feels weak. People sense hesitation, they sense uncertainty, and they sense that something is being held back, and it doesn't create respect. But controlled silence is completely different. Controlled silence is when you could speak, you have something to say, and the ability to respond. But you choose not to, not because you're afraid, but because it's unnecessary, because it doesn't add value or deserve your energy. That silence feels strong. It feels intentional, grounded, and decisive, and people feel that immediately. They might not be able to explain it, but they respond to it, because humans are constantly reading signals, not just words, but energy, timing, and restraint. And when someone shows restraint, it signals control. Now here's where this becomes a real skill. Learning to distinguish when to speak and when to stay silent. Because this isn't about never explaining anything. It's about not over-explaining. It's about not speaking from pressure, but from choice. There will be moments where speaking is necessary, where clarity matters and communication is important. In those moments, you speak clearly and directly without overextending. You say what needs to be said, and then you stop. You don't add extra layers or over-justify. You don't keep talking just to fill space. You let your words stand on their own. And that's another level of power. Being able to say less but mean more. Because most people do the opposite. They say more and mean less. Their words become diluted, their message becomes unclear, and their presence becomes noisy. But when you refine your communication and remove the unnecessary, everything becomes sharper. Your words hit harder, your silence lasts longer, and your presence becomes clearer. And people start paying attention differently. Now let's talk about the internal side of this. The reason people over-explain is because they don't trust themselves enough to leave things unsaid. They feel like if they don't explain everything, they'll lose control of how they're perceived. And that fear comes from instability, from not being fully grounded in who they are. Because when you are grounded and trust your decisions, you don't feel that urgency. You don't feel that pressure to correct everything because you're not dependent on how others interpret you. You're anchored internally. And that anchor is what allows you to stay silent without feeling weak. So if you want to truly master this, you don't just practice silence, you build certainty. Certainty in who you are, your decisions, and your direction. Because once that certainty is there, silence becomes natural. It's no longer something you're forcing. It's something that happens automatically. Now, there's another layer. When you don't explain yourself, you create space. And people don't like empty space. So they try to fill it with thoughts, assumptions, and interpretations. Most of the time, they fill it in your favor. Because when there's no clear explanation, people tend to assign depth. They think there must be a reason, they must know something, or they're being intentional. And that perceived depth increases your value. Not because you did more, but because you revealed less. That's the power of restraint. Imagine applying this consistently in conversations, relationships, and work. You stop reacting instantly and stop over-explaining. Over time, your entire presence evolves. You become calmer and more deliberate. People start approaching you differently. They respect your time more and choose their words carefully because they know you're not easily pulled into things. And that's where real freedom begins. Because now, you're no longer reacting to life, you're directing it. It all started with something simple: stopping the need to explain yourself. So the next time you feel that urge to justify or defend, pause. Don't suppress it, just observe it. Notice where it's coming from. Is it certainty or fear? Is it necessary, or is it just a habit you've repeated for years? And then make a conscious choice